Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Healthy in a Wild World. I am here with someone very special. Leah and I had talked, and we have a couple of things. When I saw her name pop up, I just instantly went there. Except it's Leah, not Leah. You guys know my dog.
Is your
And
dog's name Leia?
yeah, my Westie is Leah. That's why I asked. And then my son is Drew. So and if anyone's watching this podcast, they have seen me go, this aligned with this. And I see patterns and I see systems in the universe and I align them. And this is how I like connecting with people. And Leah just popped out of a page when I asked her podcast guest. And I was like, yep, okay, we're done. I probably couldn't have, I didn't need to look for anybody else. I was done. But not only that, we started talking and she has quite the story. And as many of you know, a lot of the people that I've worked with have pretty serious health issues. And the goal is to overcome them, to heal them, and to have long-term wellness. So without further ado, I'm actually going to have Leah introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her story, because you guys, it is very inspirational. She talks about how to make your soul happy, and I'm going to let her take it from there. So thank you for coming. Thank you. I am so glad you're here. Welcome, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Bonnie, so much. I'm super excited to be here. I have loved connecting with you. Our first intro conversation, I was just like, oh, I love this woman's energy. Yes. And how awesome that your babies just kind of came together and created me.
Isn't that so cool?
That's so cool. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and share some of my story and my transformation with you and with your audience because we're humans, just humaning through life that can be really, really challenging. And you're in the health and wellness field, and you know that really the system and the education around us really doesn't support us in optimally navigating those challenges and the chaos and the crazy waves of life. And a lot of my story is of that, is learning how to navigate these waves and learning how to support myself and stepping into a more self-empowered healer and being able to discern what my body needs, how to communicate with it, what's best for me, learning how to find my voice, speak my truth, set my boundaries, heal my relationships through communication, and really start to create the life that I want, not live the life that everybody else says it should look like that and you should do that. And part of that is really breaking free from the societal conditioning, the limiting beliefs, breaking free from the roommate in your head. It also looks like learning how to be your own healer. And I will not call myself a healer. I don't like that word for me to describe what I do for you, because ultimately I'm just a reflection to help my clients and the people in my world become greater healers themselves, and empowering them to be the best possible self-healer that they can, learning when they can support themselves, when they need to reach outwardly to external support to be supported, right? And so for me, a lot of my journey started when I was really young. I went through a very, very emotionally tumultuous childhood. My parents went through a gnarly divorce. They separated by the time I was 8 years old. And the entire time, there was yelling and screaming and back talk and just a lack of kindness. And, my mind, when I think of my childhood, does not think of any experiences with my family together. I have no memories of my mom and my dad and me and my brother being together. None. I see it in photos, but I can't remember it. I do have memories of being with my mom independently and with my dad independently, which is super interesting, right? And there in that experience, I learned how to not communicate. I learned how my void that I witnessed through my parents, right, this lack of communication, this separation, led me to having the value of communication being my number one value in my life. And that emotionally tumultuous childhood, feeling very unsupported emotionally. I was always physically safe. I always had a place to be, friends to be in my home. There was always food in the refrigerator. And for that, I'm so, 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 so grateful. But emotionally, there was a lack of safety. And I started developing some really chronic health symptoms at a very young age. They actually started around the time it was around the time of like my first period. I want to say maybe 13 years old. And it actually corresponded with receiving the first HPV vaccine. And the number one side effect of the HPV vaccine was pancreatitis, inflammation of the pancreas. And that was at the time where like the HPV vaccine was pretty new. And so I was one of the first people to receive it. And what people don't think about is, and I want to preface this, like I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm someone that does support vaccinations. I also support making sure that your body can support receiving the toxins and chemicals that you are getting in, and the adjuvants that you're receiving in the vaccine, so that your body can actually detox it. Because what happens is if you can't detox the things that are the dyes and the chemicals and the other things that are in these substances in these vaccinations, then your body can end up having some of these side effects like the pancreatitis. And the environment that I was living in was very, very stressful, and actually combined led my body to not be able to process that very well. And so that's when I started developing some like really odd symptoms, and I complained and I complained and I complained. Nobody heard me, which then like really lit up that whole like not being heard wound in my life. And nobody found the fact that I had a pancreatic tumor the size of an orange. And 16 rolls around and I started internally bleeding, and that's how it was found after like going to their like practitioners and specialists like at some of the top hospitals in the entire world, and nobody found this. And I thought that that was going to be like the end of things, that all my symptoms were going to like be gone, that I was no longer going to spend my time like wrapped around a toilet just like suffering in abdominal pain. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And the years following that major abdominal surgery, I ended up developing more severe symptoms and started developing really severe chronic pain, ended up herniating 3 discs in my lumbar spine, the scar tissue in my abdomen. Like I couldn't find a massage therapist that would help me and work on it. And I got to a point where I just was like, I'm so done with this. My mental health was suffering at the time because my gut biome was like so thrown off by like the opening up my abdominal cavity. And so I'm suffering with severe physical pain. I'm suffering with severe mental and emotional pain. My mindset was terrible. I just was the victim of every experience in my life. And I was just miserable. I was suffering. And I opted into a bodybuilding show at the time because I thought that it was going to help me find confidence and self-love and connect with my mind and my body. And it did the opposite, and it ended up driving me deeper into the darkness. And I was like, cool, great. My body looks awesome. I have 10% body fat. I can see every striation on my body. I thought that I was the epitome of health. And I was like, oh, actually, no. Like, found myself sitting on a kitchen floor, contemplating jumping off a building and committing suicide and ending my life. And in that moment, I discovered choice. I could not stop binge eating chocolate because my hormones were so out of whack that I needed that dopamine hit constantly. And I ended up putting on my shoes. I grabbed this bag of chocolate and junk food and I walked it downstairs and handed it to a homeless man. And it was in that moment that I realized that like the power of choice was stronger than the victim mindset and the suffering that I was finding myself perpetuating. And it took a couple of years, but I started like choosing to be the creator of my experience. And I started trying to figure out, I was honestly kind of a fuck it mentality at that point. I was like, you know what? Like, if you guys aren't going to help me, and if you're just going to keep putting band-aids on the symptoms and giving me medications and not helping me figure out why this is happening, and like my body's different than the majority of other people, because most people I know don't survive pancreatic tumors. So let's figure this one out, And I ended up, just like choosing me. And I went on this like mission to figure out what can I do for myself to change my experience, to reduce my chronic pain. And I dove really deep into movement, into functional movement, into nervous system hacking, into kinesiology, into every possible thing that I could do to reprogram my nervous system. in this process, I learned that movement is like the last domino that falls. Your physical body is the last thing that you're going to start to feel and experience symptoms with. And there's a lot of things that come before that, including trauma, emotions, mindset, energetics, the environment, like the products that you're using in your life. And so that was really like the start of my like hippie journey. My friends joke around, but I'm like a super earthy, crunchy hippie, and I love that about me. But it's because I had to be, because it's what allowed me to no longer suffer. And so over the last like 10 years of my life, more than that, I don't know, I'd say about 10 years of my life, I have really like gone out of my way to learn everything I possibly can to support my health, from physical movement and functional rehabilitation to body work and massage therapy to energy work to trauma work and trauma healing to subconscious reprogramming to metabolic health and supplementation for metabolic health to like communication and authentic relating. And then I really started to find like somatics and embodiment techniques and like how to really tap into these feelings and these emotions and somatically move it through the body, because the body remembers everything. And it's not just what it remembers from this life, but it also remembers things from past lives as well, which is why it's so important to look at generations past, your mom, your parents and your grandparents especially, but even what happened before that. Like think about where your family came from. I mean, like what could they possibly have experienced that led you to have these really deep-seated beliefs and feelings and thoughts, right? And so it's been just this whole journey of trying to navigate, like, how do I support myself? And in the process, I was like, got so frustrated with the system that really is broken, so broken. We don't have a root cause system, we have an acute care system. And so I started trying to navigate, like, how do I give back? And how do I support the world around me, and learning how to become more empowered in their ability to support themselves? And in this process, I just started realizing like I can do anything I want. I can create anything I want. I can make any change that I want and desire if I set my mind to it, if I manifest it, if I align with it. And then that's how it led me to like creating and building a life that I freaking love. Like I just was so tired of being in a life experience that didn't make me happy, that made me miserable, that made me have physical, mental, and emotional pain. And I was like, I'm done with this. This is not it. I'm going to find it. And I set off to do so.
I love it. I love it. There's so much in there that I'm like, yep, yep, yep. Because there's, you're right. There's so much that's just broken. And one of the things that happened this past week is my business partner lost her dad. And he's older, and they were brushing his symptoms away. And effectively what happened, and it's something so minor and so simple when we think about it, is a B12 deficiency, because they put him on a medication to treat one symptom. And the medication should have only been taken for 4 weeks. It was taken for several years. But because nobody thought to figure out what the root cause was for all of the symptoms he's been having since he hit that threshold, he endured all these things. And it's stories like yours, stories like his. I mean, that's the one that's fresh in my mind. And there's so much in this world right now that it's just, we need to take charge of our own health.
We need to learn. We need to be open to asking questions. Like, I think part of the problem is that we take what the doctors and the nurses and the people around us say as the way, instead of taking it in and like being with it and feeling it out and then discerning what is your way. And I always say that. It's like, what is your way? Like, take what the doctor has to say and be with it. And then with that information, figure out, okay, what's my way? And I think that that's super common. And I'm so sorry for the loss there. And I can imagine that's really hard for her, especially being, in business with you. But I think that part of the issue right now is that we are being handed these quick fixes, right? That's what we want in this world. We want a quick fix. We can't slow down. We're not willing to look at what's brushed under the rug. And so we go and we seek out a quick fix, which is oftentimes medication, because that just funds the whole system. We don't need to get into that if you don't want to, but
we could go down so many rabbit holes. And the biggest thing is part of the reason I started Wild Free Health. Part of the reason I have the journey I have is because just as a trainer, because I started out as a trainer. And it's funny you mentioned bodybuilding, but we'll talk about that in a second. I thought I was going to go and help people lose weight, work with sports teams. No big deal. This is what trainers do. And I ended up with all of these clients who doctors weren't giving them answers. They were throwing pills at them.
Mm-hmm. And the pills have side effects that people aren't asking about, that people aren't questioning. And they're also not being informed that like pills are not meant to be a long-term fix. They're meant to be a short-term support. And then there's no encouragement for people to fill in the gap between like, right, to continue building the bridge onto the other side. It's like, great, here's your short-term support. Now, like use this as like kind of like your energy pack per se to help you get ahead so that you can start to unravel and like get to a point where you don't actually need the medication anymore. And I actually like I had a client that messaged me this week. And can I share a story really quick?
By all means.
Okay. So I had a client that messaged me this week, and we worked together about 2 years ago. And this woman came to me, and she was honestly one of the most depressed people that I've ever worked with. And a part of me was like, wow, like can I help this woman? Like I don't know if I'm the right person, but she was like, I want your help. And I was like, okay, all right, let's dive in. And we worked together for 6 months. And I gave her every tool in the toolbox that I could. And there were days that she came and she just like, she wasn't moving the dial a whole lot, but she was I was planting these seeds. And she was on thyroid medication. She was on multiple antidepressants. She had a voice in her head that just was saying terrible, terrible things to her on a daily basis. She was overcome by trauma. She had cancer in the past. She was just really suffering in life. And she texted me this week and we caught up. I was like, how are you doing? She's like, I'm doing amazing. And one of the big goals that she had for herself was to be able to give back and to support women that were navigating cancer. But at the time, she didn't have the space to hold for anyone else because she needed to hold it for her. So she messaged me this week and she's like, I'm doing the best I've ever done in my life. Thanks to all the things that you taught me. Like I have completely turned my life around. And she sent me, I kid you not, like a list of like 25 things of all these things that she's doing, from biohacking to grounding to gardening to like supporting the women with cancer, like doing the thing that she told me would light her soul on fire. And it was just like, I just had this moment where I was so proud, but so excited for her. And to see that somebody that is in a place like that, that's so dark and so deep in the hole, can literally completely turn their life around to be in a place where they're living in abundance, where they're moving their body every day, where they're happy and they're healthy. And she's come off of almost every single medication except for her thyroid medication, which she's currently working with her doctor to get off the last little bit of.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, that's it. Like that's it.
Yeah. That stories like that are why I'm still here. They're why I'm still here. Because it is possible. And like you said, we're not the healers. We know what tools are out there. We have the information. And I love telling people that, when you work with a holistic practitioner in any capacity, whatever we do, and whatever our fields of expertise are, you're working with someone that could be your best friend, but they're not the healer. We heal ourselves. We heal ourselves. And
We just don't live in a society that teaches us how to do that.
no.
We learn math and science and history going through school. We don't learn is self-mastery. We don't learn how to breathe and be with our emotions. Nobody's doing that. Some places are, don't get me wrong, but we need it in every single place. Like if you're learning math in elementary school, you also need to be learning how to breathe and
Yes.
dance
Yeah.
and be like.
Yeah, they're learning it in the preschool that the boys are at. They're learning that. But I specifically looked for that because I know how crucial it is. And they're getting to the age, so next year they'll graduate preschool, they have to go to kindergarten. Now I got to find a whole other school that does that. And like you said, they're out there, they're there. But our society, I mean, part of my degree, and I'm sure you've probably taken these classes, is they teach you about the history of modern medicine, right? How it came to be. And basically there was this split where scientists and doctors got cocky and decided, well, this acute medicine this is the only way that's going to help heal you, when in reality, we need both. If you break an arm, holistic health is going to help you. But if you really, truly broken that bone, you're probably going to need surgery. You're going to need modern medicine to help.
You need some acute care.
Yeah, you need some pain meds in that situation. I've done that multiple times. You can't get away without it. I'm sorry.
No, I'm not going to be resetting my own ankle. That didn't happen, and that's not going to happen. No.
They had to reset my shoulder, and no thank you. Without modern medicine, oh heck no. But that being said, if you don't have both, you can't really truly heal. And the body is this phenomenal organic creature that is capable of so much more than society has led us to believe. And we've been conditioned to believe that the answer lies in a doctor's office, when in reality, it could be right outside of your door. It could be in your kitchen. It could be in your own head, in your next breath. You have to be the one to figure that out and decide that. And it's actually not as complicated as it's been made to be.
No, it's not at all. Like, you put the fuel in your car so your car can function. Same thing. It's the human body. It's like you put the fuel in the body so that the body can heal. And then I think of things like the woman's body literally creates humanity. Like, we literally create functional human beings with nervous systems, with bones, with muscles, like in us from nothing, right? Like, why do we think that we can't heal ourselves? Like, our body has the innate ability to do anything that we ask it to do, that we support it to do. And so that's where, like, for me, I really want people to realize how much power they actually have to create change in their life, not just in their physical body, but outside of their being as well. And what's beautiful is the laws of nature show us that, like, what happens within is mirrored externally in the world around us. And so as you dive deeper into healing yourself and to doing all these things within you, making your body healthier, your life around you completely changes. Like, it's beautiful, right? And I'm actually really curious on that tangent there. Was it hard for you to find a school for your guys to go to, your kids?
No, but here's why. A very good friend of mine, she actually started out a client and has become my sister. So I have my sister, and then she lives a mile from my sister. So when we go to Austin, we visit the aunties.
Oh,
we visit my husband's family. She actually works for one of the schools. So they go to a Goddard, and they're in transition with some of their platforms, but they're still like they're teaching protocols and stuff like that. But they still follow basic principles. So it's mind, body, spirit, knowledge, right? And she has worked for them for, I think she's going on 11, 12 years now. So for me, it wasn't very hard because I had seen her work. I knew what the Goddard principles were just from working with her. And from being so close to her, I understood that. And then once we found out we were having them, it's like, when time comes, I want to make sure they're in a Goddard school. And now our first experience was a complete bomb. And that was when I realized that not all franchises are the same. So you have to be very, very particular. They are supposed to be following these principles across the board. So it wasn't hard for me to find, but I have realized since then that for other people around us who don't have that personal connection, it's really challenging.
Yeah.
That's not the breathing. They do yoga. They teach them to breathe. Like there's so Mr. Rogers, right? Someone changed Mr. Rogers and transitioned it and revamped it, and it's now Daniel Tiger. So they took Daniel Tiger and made him this cartoon, and Daniel Tiger does 4 breaths. If your brain is overloaded, if your emotions are all over the place, you take 4 breaths. There's a whole song associated with it. I have no idea what the song is, but the kids can sing it to you. But they do things like that in school. and they talk about emotions attached to colors. For anybody out there, if you have kids, it's called Color Monsters, the book. And it's fabulous. This little tiny monster gets help from a little girl to put his emotions, which are all chaotic and he's all sorts of colors, into jars. So you put your happy in a jar, you're sad in a jar, you're angry in a jar, you're scared in a jar. And what you're left with is an understanding of these feelings. It's not that you're not going to feel them. It's just these are what they are. And by associating the colors to them, it gives you a way of either breathing or doing some sort of activity. So like if you're happy, but you're overly happy, like your energy feels spastic, then it tells you to dance. Because physical activity is a release. And if you're sad, it's once you see the blue, you go and you find a hug, you find something to laugh at, you breathe a little bit, things like that. And same thing with fear and all the others. And the ultimate goal is to feel pink, which is love. So
I love this.
There's like all these little things nowadays that just warm my heart, because I'm like, yes, we need this and we need this and we need that, because these are lessons that we didn't get growing up.
And is this, if you don't mind me asking, is this a private school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Goddard is a private. I don't know what happens in the public schools.
Yeah,
I think that is where these things are needed and these tools are needed, especially in impoverished areas where people are overwhelmed. They're not getting the funding that they need. So their projects, while they could be very beneficial and helpful, aren't getting the needed support.
Yeah. Deep-rooted trauma in those populations as well, right? Because of all the poverty and the lack and the scarcity. And like that to me is like a big part of my mission in life, is helping people that can't afford these experiences and these tools, like get them. Like I have a dream of either partnering with or creating a nonprofit where coaches get to be a part of this nonprofit, and kind of like Doctors Beyond Borders, but it's this holistic, like embodied somatic approach to healing, where the coaches who are a part of the community actually get to donate to the nonprofit. And obviously the funds are, as practitioners, are coming from the people that can afford the healing and that can afford that deeper support. So now the ones that are able to afford the deeper support are fueling the ones and supporting the ones that can't afford it, that really need it so bad and the most. And then that allows the doctors and the practitioners and the holistic coaches to be able to go to places in the States, outside of the States, around the world, that are in poverty, that are struggling, that need these tools so freaking bad, that have no idea that they even exist because they're so outside of their perspective, right? They're looking through the rose-colored glasses because that's all they have, right? And they're likely not even rose-colored. Like they might be like not so nicely colored, and so like I think that is so important, and that's a great point that you make, is these places that can afford it, especially the public school systems, like we need these tools. Everyone needs these tools before they actually need them.
Right.
I can't even imagine if I was going through school, like oh my God, had I been going through school in elementary school and been learning these things, my life would look so different.
Oh, very much so. And you brought up your upbringing. So my parents are still together. They should not be together. Because when my sister and I look back, and my brother's 10 years younger, so it's almost like it's my sister and I, and then he had his upbringing separate from us. It almost feels like a separation. And that's all we knew growing up, was people yelling and screaming at each other and someone storming out and things being thrown, and and it was very volatile. It was very traumatic in that, when things are very calm for a while there in my 20s and my 30s, if things were calm, something was wrong. And even now I still have moments where things are going so well and everybody in the house is happy-go-lucky and we're managing stress well. everything is balanced. And then you hit a point where you start to doubt that. And I'm in a place in life now, and it's been far enough removed that now I'm like, yeah, no, you know what? We're not going back there. And I can identify it, squash it, and move on. But it took my parents until maybe 10 years ago to stop doing that. So, and I really do think it was the introduction of grandchildren, because we
Mm.
are all definitely in places where we don't want our kids to be exposed to that. And I mean, they had a very stressful time frame when they were raising us. It was very stressful for them, and I understand that. And nobody taught them how to manage stress.
Yeah.
So it's generation after generation after generation. And my grandmother was actually, she had a lot of stress, a lot of trauma happened to her. She got married older. Prior to that, she lost her mom young, grew up in Boston, became a nanny in downtown New York. I think she lived in either Queens or Brooklyn. I'm not quite sure. But she became a nanny for a British diplomat who moved to China, and she had to escape China with the diplomat's children when their civil war broke out. And they almost didn't make it. And she took care of those kids, I think, for a good 6 months or a year, maybe longer, before the British diplomat and his wife could escape the country.
Wow.
And about 5 years later, she married my grandpa, who lived his entire life on a 1,000-acre farm in the middle of Western Maryland. And she went from one extreme to another. This woman had never cooked a meal in her life. And during that time, the wife is the one that cooks the meals, except she had never cooked a meal in her life, so she didn't know how to cook. And that became a whole other trauma, because for, I think, I would say years, based on the stories I've heard, my great-grandmother was verbally abusive.
Mm.
She didn't understand the concept that a woman would not know how to cook. And this
Mm.
is someone who lives here so much, and as kind and genuinely warm-hearted as she was, that trauma still passes, it still passes down. So you've got stress management on both sides, breathing, etc. Nobody's healing anything.
I want to ask, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. Sounds like quite the journey that your grandmother was on, and
Yeah.
like also like I can only imagine the strength that brought her in many ways, right? Like
Yeah.
what an admirable thing to love someone's children so much that you take them on as your own and support them, and do whatever you need to save them. I'm curious, like, what have you observed in your own world, if anything, pattern wise, that you have connected with her experience, and that maybe you've noticed has been passed down to you or was passed down to you?
We feel like we can save everybody.
Mm.
We feel like and it's almost a mission. It's an unconscious mission. And when you can't save someone, or when you can't do enough to help somebody else, it feels like you lose a piece of yourself. And I noticed that a lot with my dad. He bends over backwards, and he always has. My aunt, his brothers, his sister, they bend over backwards to try and help as many people as often and with as much. I mean, they would give away everything they own to help somebody else. Um, and trying to not give away so much that you're left with nothing, that balance. I noticed that balance over the years is where a lot of my family members struggle. And I
Mm.
can stem that right back to her experiences, you know.
That's a
Mm.
beautiful realization.
Yeah.
Because once you realize it, once you see it, you get to create change, right? And you get to work on not continuing to pass that down to your sons and to their future children. And I think that's such an amazing part is like once you see something, you can't unsee it, right? And then
Right.
you have the option to either avoid it, which what you resist persists, and it will continue to affect your health physically, mentally, emotionally, and the world around you, your relationships, or you can actually choose to be with it and look at it and change something about it. I had similar experience. For me, I for a really long time, and a lot of this wound was opened even more as a kid when I mentioned, like the whole like I wasn't being heard, nobody was hearing me, nobody was listening to me, right? And I felt like I was this um, I was invisible
Mhm.
almost when it came to my emotions, and what I was seeing. And a couple of years ago, I'm a big supporter of psychedelics. Psychedelics have been a beautiful part of my healing journey, and happy to talk more about those. But a couple of years ago, I started having deeper conversation with my dad, and there's a whole journey with me and my dad. We used to not have a relationship for 4 years when he left my mom. Um, I didn't have a relationship for all through high school, almost 5 years into college. And then we started healing our relationship. And had recently, at about 4 years ago, found out more history about my family and about his side of the family. And I found out that, didn't find out, but I knew that his father, my papa, my grandfather, my entire life knowing him when I was little, he was pretty much a vegetable in bed. He couldn't talk, he couldn't speak, he was mute, he had pretty significant dementia and Alzheimer's. For about 10 years, he was in a hospital bed like that. It was a very, very slow process for him. And he literally couldn't, he was mute, he couldn't say anything. And I came to find out that there was a lot in his family that went brushed under the rug, from drug addiction to physical abuse, that things that were happening in the family on a regular basis that nobody ever spoke about. And especially him, he wasn't anyone that talked about anything that happened. And interesting to notice how it then, translated into him being mute and being in a hospital bed, not being able to actually say anything in his life. And I was finding one of the challenges for me as I was moving through this phase of my world was really speaking my truth, really like being able to express the things that were on my heart, on my mind, like being able to verbally like communicate about the things that were happening and trust that it was a safe space to do that. So I go camping with a group of friends and we end up Big Sur. And we all take a bunch of mushrooms and we go into the woods. And we're walking through the woods, and psychedelics are beautiful because they are medicine. They serve you with medicine that you may not necessarily want, but spirit's like, you're ready for this. I'm going to show this to you. It's time. I'm like, okay. So I'm walking through the woods. I actually end up stumbling across a rock. And this rock triggered me into this whole freaking experience because I realized that like crystals were this only one way that I feel like I could connect with my stepmother, which then brought up my father. And then like feeling like recognizing ultimately that there was this connection between not communicating and a disconnection in humaning, right? Like relationships. And that happens when you don't communicate. And then I end up like having all these realizations between my stepmom and my dad, and I almost faked. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. Like, so I'm on the ground and I'm like, okay, I need to go back to camp. So somebody takes me back to camp and we sit down. And I sit down on this bench and I have this whole realization as we're like walking into camp, um, that like I am carrying this pattern of not using my voice and not speaking my voice. And all of a sudden, as I realized this, I start projectile vomiting. Kid you not.
Oh.
And the entire time as I'm like projectile vomiting, I had all these downloads and realizations that came from my papa. And all of these things that he never said that I was like purging out for him, that he had been stuck with for so long. And the entire time that I am projectile vomiting, there is an owl sitting on the tree above me. And like for anyone that knows like spirit animals, like the owl is the all-seer, it is the holder of wisdom, like ancestral wisdom. And as soon as I stopped, the owl flew away. And it was after that experience that I started like really leaning into my voice, and I started singing, and I started writing music, and I started like expressing in my relationships what was a yes and what was a no, and like setting these boundaries that led me to have like not only a much more beautiful relationship with myself, that I got to honor my worth because I was really connecting to my voice, but also with other people. And so, like you're saying, it's like we carry these wounds from our ancestors. And until we look at them, or until something triggers us to realize that we're still holding on to it, it's going to affect not just our physical health and our well being, but also the world that we live in.
Yes. Yes. And it just keeps going. It perpetuates. And somewhere along the line, someone's got to stop.
Mhm.
That's my personal feeling. Someone has to stop it. And I hit a point in my healing because I'd lost 100 pounds and then became a trainer. And after working with so many women, I realized that there was much more to this health and healing journey than I had ever realized. I honestly thought, just lose some weight and become a trainer. And, but this is what you do. You just, here, eat healthy, go do a couple squats, we're good. And the realization that there's so much more to it. And, kind of to your point, there comes a point, and psychedelics definitely help, herbs help, where it helps your body and your brain specifically, deal with those aspects that are the most traumatic. And at some point, your subconscious says, it's time for this to go.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what you're doing, it doesn't matter where you are. It's time, it's got to go. And 9 times out of 10, when it's being released, when your brain is finally dealing with that, whatever that thing is, it feels like it has to go, the emotion that is released triggers such a strong response from your body, a physical response. It can be crying, it can be vomiting, it can be, thrashing about, not a seizure, but thrashing about.
Making, yeah,
Yeah, the shakes, the tears, the anger, it manifests in so many different ways and so differently from person to person. And you're not in charge unless you decide to take control of your health, your body, your mind, and your spirit, and really work through those traumas and really work through the things in your past that hurt you, whether it was from you or from generations past.
totally. Your body remembers everything. And again, like I'm a really big supporter and fan of psychedelics. They've been literally like I would not be where I am today without them. But I used to be the person that was like drugs are bad. So it used to be me. I actually lost a really, really beautiful friendship because of my judgments and my past beliefs around substances and medicines specifically. There's a difference between using something intentionally and using something recreationally, right? But like even with like I've sat with ayahuasca 6 times, and I after my first weekend sitting with ayahuasca, almost all of my like chronic Crohn's and IBS symptoms stopped. Almost all of them, the most intense ones at least. And that that experience that I had my first weekend, my grandmother came into the room to be with me. She was a huge part of my journey. When my grandmother passed away when I was really young, when my parents were before 8 years old, when my parents were going through a lot, she was the only safety net I had. She was my out. She brought me so much love and joy, and she passed away really young. And that was always really hard for me. And it wasn't until that time that she came back into my presence and became a beautiful guide for me. And it's so funny. Like I'm actually now sitting here like redecorating my house and like doing everything I can to like pull essences of my grandmother into the space. Um, and And so when I was sitting with ayahuasca that weekend, she came into the room first. I saw her as this angel, like flapping her wings. And I felt, before I even saw it, I felt the wind of the wings like thrashing in the corner. And I like looked over and I saw her in the space with me. And I was like, whoa, like this is wild. And then I ended up, you talked about the sensations in the body because the body remembers. So now we're going to connect back to my 16-year-old self that went through this major abdominal surgery. That whole first night, I was in the most excruciating physical pain. And I don't want to divert anyone from like sitting with ayahuasca because this really doesn't happen to a whole lot of people. But I had the most severe, excruciating abdominal pain. It was my body needed to re-experience what my nervous system had experienced when I was so young to be able to process it and move it out. And after that, like it was challenging. And like you said, it's like you can't really avoid it. If you try to avoid it, it's just going to perpetuate it. But after I processed that and after my body like moved that sensation through, I had some of the shakes to like move energy out of my body. And once that happened, like my body released and stopped crying out through these symptoms. And it's incredible what happens when you allow yourself to reprocess and to be with the things that caused you pain in the past, physical, mental, emotional, or energetic. And I think that when you set out, right, let's say you're like in a place where you're like, oh, I don't like my life. I don't like my health. I'm not happy. I'm not healthy. And you start to think about, oh, well, that's what I want, or at least that's what I think I want. I think what starts to happen is you start to energetically recalibrate and you start to like have these experiences that allow you to shed that vibration which doesn't support you and expanding and healing and getting to that place that you want to be. And in order to do that, like you have to move through the process of somatically re-experiencing with safety. And this is where like self-resourcing is so important, knowing how to support yourself, you know?
Yeah. You have to, and you have to know yourself at least a little bit to know what's going to make you feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of healing elements through, the Native Americans, through traditional Chinese medicine, through Ayurvedic, through people and cultures that were here long before European cultures. And these healing elements, these healing practices that have been here time and time and time again. It leads us to today, and using these elements are really like you have to find the thing that's gonna connect you to the healing part of your soul.
And no one thing is better than the other either. It's all a matter of what works for you.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's the part that's really the message that a lot of people need to get is everybody's on their own journey, and you really need to figure out what are you gonna align with? What are you gonna connect well with? Because if you don't connect to something, somewhere along the line, everything's gonna come flooding out, and you're gonna have no control over it.
Yeah, learning to have that discernment, listening to your body, and like we were saying earlier, right? It's like everybody and their mother is going to have an opinion and something to say to you. But
Yep.
recognizing that their opinion does not necessarily need to be yours. And if someone rejects you for having an opinion that's different, they're not meant to be here to support you because supporting someone is supporting all of who they are, not all of who you want or think that they should be. And I think that's so important is, and I had this reminder the other day. I went and saw a new practitioner helping me with some movement patterns. I know a lot about biomechanics, so I humbled myself to be able to step into this learning role,
Uh,
always learning. And towards the end, she shared something with me. I asked her, like, what do you think I should and should not be doing? I asked. And she gave me some feedback that was very different in perspective than what I believe. She pretty much told me to stop doing everything until this clears up. And I was like, well, that's not going to happen. I will do this on top of the things that I'm doing to find balance, but I'm not just going to stop everything. That's just not how I work and how I function. I don't think that stretching is bad. I don't think that yoga is bad. I don't think that doing all these things are actually going to like make things worse. It's a matter of how much more of the other thing I'm willing to bring in my opinion, to find that harmony and to find that balance for me and for my body. Because I know if I don't do those things, if I don't dance, if I don't snowboard, if I don't do yoga, if I don't do all these other things, that's not just going to that's going to affect this, like my mental and my emotional body. And like if that's not balanced and harmonized, my physical body is not going to do anything that I want it to do. Absolutely not. And so it for a moment like put me in this place where I was like, am I wrong? Like, am I doing the wrong thing? Am I like is it wrong that I just paid $4,000 for a yoga teacher training? Like, no, of course it's not. And I had to like check myself for a minute. And I was like, that's her opinion. She gets to have that. It's okay for me to disagree. And I think that's huge. Like we live in the society that like shows us and teaches us that it's wrong to disagree with somebody. And then we get alienated for disagreeing with somebody. Like, oh, it's so frustrating to me. And that's why I love the work that I get to do because it's like you get to do what's best for you. Not what that person thinks is best for you, what you believe is best for you based off of what you know about yourself, based off of your values, based off of what you know you need to feel good. And coming back to the whole thing that we were talking about at the beginning, like, is your soul skipping? And like, what can you do to make your soul skip? Like, are you happy? Is your soul happy? Are you fulfilled? Is your soul on fire? To the point where like you just want to go skip down the road. Like if it's not, let's look at things and reframe things and recalibrate so that you can be a skipping soul.
I love that. I love that. That's such a wonderful place to land. I love that because there's so much truth to it. So, if somebody wants their soul to skip and they want to connect with you, how do they find you?
So I tend to hang out on Instagram a whole lot. At Mind Body with Leah is my Instagram. I have a lot of different ways that I support people. I have a lot of free ways that I support people, from some of my freebies to every Thursday, I offer free coaching and free support on Instagram Live. So come and hang out with me, 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. And I also work with clients one-on-one. I have a women's membership. I have group programs. Like whatever level of support you're seeking, like I'm there to meet you and I've got that for you. Yeah, like I love humans. I love connecting. I love learning about you and the challenges that you're moving through. I love knowing what I'm sharing that resonates and hits home for you. And so like come follow me, send me a message, let me know where you came from, let me know how you found me. And yeah, I would just love to learn a little bit more about you and start to develop a relationship, because relationships are what makes the world go round.
It really is. And this is how we support each other.
I also have a podcast too. I want to drop that, the Mindful Evolution podcast. And so if you're interested in continuing to dive deeper into your personal journey and just to keep bringing more mindfulness to your approach of human evolution, the Mindful Evolution podcast is probably for you. So
there you go. And all of this stuff is going to be in the show notes below because we want to make sure you guys can find Leah. And I have a funny feeling, I hope I didn't call you Leah, and I'm sorry if I did.
It's okay. Like I said, I don't hate it. I'll accept it. It's like more of like the Jewish way of referring to my name. But I just prefer Leah. So, and I'll accept either way. Thank you.
Great. It works for me. Thank you. I am so glad you were here. Thank you so much for the conversation. And I'm looking forward to staying connected.
Me too, Bonnie. It was such a pleasure being here. Thank you for allowing me to be in your presence. And like this conversation was like so fun and cool and like unique. And yeah, you're doing beautiful things in the world. And I'm just really grateful for you.
Thank you. Right back at you. I love seeing what you're doing. And yeah, I love your office hours. We'll definitely put those out there for sure. Because I know quite a few people in our community could use that. So. Well, thank you guys for watching. If you like this episode, you want to see more, comment like below, let us know what you like. And yes, I will even take the ugly parts. It's all good. It's part of growth. So leave it down below and we will chat with you later. Cheers. Perfect. Thank you. Oh, I love that. So good.